Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports. And today we're going to talk about bike sizing. This is a reaction video to Russ's video on Pathless Pedaled. By the way, I love his channel and I love his stuff. But I thought I would do a reaction video. And it's not to disagree with him, but to agree with quite a few points and then just add a little bit from my experience in selling bikes. He is someone who rides bikes. I'm the one who actually has to make that expensive decision for someone. So let's talk about the very, very first thing. You should be working through, this is a disclaimer, you should be working through a bike fitter or your LBS, your local bike shop, when ascertaining what size bike you should be riding. Hopefully, the local bike shop has a qualified and experienced bike fitter. So, knocking out two birds with one stone. Or you might work with a bike fitter who's independent and does not sell bikes, and then they give you the parameters of the bikes that would fit you. Like, okay, you need a bike with at least this much stack, at least this, no more than this reach, and you know, go forth and find a bike that is within these parameters, right? So you feel like you're getting some independent advice, and then of course the bike shop will want to sell you what they carry, or and that's not a bad thing. That's just they chose those brands so that they can provide their customers with variety, choice, maybe even price points, quality, those things, right? All right, so that's a disclaimer. So I'm not giving you bike sizing advice. This is advice that is just for the general population. This is not just some guy on YouTube telling you what bike you should be buying. All right, so that's out of the way. Next thing. The first thing that I wish to cover is, should you size down or should you size up if you're a tweener, right? And the answer, unfortunately, is it depends. I know you were looking for a hard, solid answer, but it depends. Because it depends on many factors. It depends on your flexibility. It depends on how you're going to ride that bike, medical issues, but just like I said, application. It just, there's so many factors that it would depend on whether you size up or size down. I'll give you just one quick saying that we say in the bike fitting and bike retail side of things. We generally say that a smaller bike is easier to make bigger than it is to make a bigger bike smaller. In other words, if you have this frame, you can kind of, raise the seat post quite a bit. You can extend the stem and, the handlebars and, raise it and do all kinds of stuff. But if the bike is too big, then there's just no way to contract these things without compromising the way the bike handles, right? So bringing back the handlebars and dropping the saddle, and then you still got this big frame in the middle, that's very hard to fix. Okay, so that's, again, it depends. But one of the biggest things that I see here, negative things that I see here in the shop, is people buy too small of a bike. And what I mean by that is, if you're someone who has a short inseam, now Jess and I, she has a shorter inseam than I do. We're both the same height. I'm maybe a little bit taller than her. But my legs are really long and her inseam is not as long. So we ride the same size bike, but they are set up dramatically different as far as saddle height and reach to the bars and stuff. So one of the oldest and the most archaic way of sizing a bike was you would straddle the bike, and Russ talked about this, and you would check for clearance in your crotch for that top tube. Well, Giant, wonderful thing that they did when they created the TCR bike, they took that top tube and sloped it down. And that was a wonderful thing because in the old days with steel bikes, we would call them square frames, the seat tube was 54 centimeters, the top tube was 54 centimeters. And when you measured those bikes, it was called a 54 because from the center of the bottom bracket to most of the time center of the seat tube, some did center to top, so you'd have to always look at the geometry chart. That was called a 54. But now the bike is at a virtual point, the bike sizing. So you have the center of the bottom bracket to where the top tube might join, right? As if it was coming across, that would be a 54. But the top tube could be way down here. You know, here's the seat tube junction on a steel bike, but now on a carbon bike, it may be like this. Sorry, like this. All right, so this old archaic way of straddling the bike and checking to see if you have enough top tube crotch clearance, that's for kids' bikes, Walmart, Target, and places like that. And generally for kids' bikes. Once you become an adult and sizing and fitting and ergonomics becomes far more important and you're not going to outgrow the bike in another summer, then that straddling the top tube thing is a very poor measurement. Unfortunately, for some folks, it's a very limiting factor. If you have a really short inseam and a long torso, you're going to struggle with getting the correct size, the correct length of top tube you need for your inseam. And this is where I'm saying that a lot of folks buy the wrong size bike. They buy a bike that's too small for them because they're like, well, the top tube, the bike with the top tube that I need, I can't straddle it, so I'm not going to ride it. Or this is even worse, the bike shop has sold them that bike. So instead of riding a 55 like they should be riding, they're riding a 53. That's one of the biggest issues I see here. And then they exacerbate that by really short stems and just you know, the head is up and forward of the axle, the front axle of the bike. All right, so first things first, the most important measurement on a bike is the top tube, because when you're sitting on the bike and you bend over like this, there's really not much you can do for that. You can raise the saddle up and down as much as you want, but when you bend here at the waist, you know, you bend over, that's the top tube. And then the length of your arms decides your stem, and the length or the width of, sorry, let me turn around. The width of your shoulders should decide the width of the bars, right? So the length of your arms is kind of your stem, and then the width is your bar, right? So the top tube measurement is far more important than the seat tube measurement, where the top tube is hitting your crotch, all that stuff. So that's the first thing. So if you're in between sizes, well, how much extra stack does the, let's use that example again, the 53 or the 55. How much extra stack does the 55 give you? Is it manageable? Is the bike at a point where, oh, that makes sense for me to move up to the 55? I get 1.5 centimeters or so of extra top tube length to accommodate for my long torso. And yeah, 2 centimeters of stack height isn't so bad. I'll take that, right? So that's one thing, is whether that stack and, of course, the reach is going to be okay if you size up. Sizing down, you may have to do a lot of stuff, and you're probably still going to be up and over the steer tube. That's the other thing too. I mean, we're trying to get the steer tube to be about here, not, hitting you in the chest, So that's one thing. The other is, generally speaking, the smaller bike, but let's take the other side, the argument for the smaller bike. A lot of racers like smaller bikes. They like the smaller bike, and they then put 130, 150. I just had a video on my channel, a 150 millimeter stem. So they like that longer stem. They like the taller saddle. They like the frame to be really small and maneuverable underneath them. So you see a lot of pro racers doing this. Now, we don't always want to emulate what pro cyclists do, but just to show you that extreme, right? This is a population that is like 1.001 of the world's population of cyclists who can ride bikes like that, right? The tall seat tube and the way down slammed handlebars and stem. So they're the ones. So this would be a common type of conversation with someone in the shop. There's a 6 foot tall guy, and he's like, well, should I get the 54 or the 56? Because I'm kind of in between, okay, well, tell me about your racing history, or what are you going to do with the bike, da, da, da. A guy like that, well, let's change that to a 6 foot guy, 56 or 58. That was more what I was talking about. The racer type would get the 56. The one looking for comfort and a taller head tube and all that, he would ride a 58. So that's a situation where that person's kind of like in the middle of these two sizes, the 56 and the 58. And the racer would go 56, and the casual recreational rider, the one looking for a little bit more height in the front end of the bike, would then go with the 58. So this is just a quick video about this. This isn't all encompassing, but maybe we can get some conversation down below, and then after that, I can do another reaction video to my own video. So Russ, thank you so much for putting up that content. I've been meaning to do a video about this for a long time. I do have videos on my channel already about geometry, and I'm comparing, I think one of the videos I did was I was comparing the race geometry of a Bianchi XR4 and then the geometry of an Infinito, which is their taller head tube endurance geometry bike. Okay, so there's that. All right, anyway, that's all for today. There's a lot more to cover, but without some questions and some Q&A and some discussion down in the description, in the comment section, I want to know more what you folks are interested in. Now, one pet peeve of mine is when someone contacts me for bike sizing information and they don't follow it up with, I'd like to buy a bike from you. My expertise has to be compensated. So free advice, not going to happen. But more importantly, I feel liable if I recommend the wrong bike to you, the wrong bike size to you, because you're not physically in my shop. I don't know about your measurements. I don't know about all your medical history and all that stuff. So I feel responsible for having sold you the wrong size bike if in fact it doesn't work out for you. So that type of thing never really works. And it's funny, I had some conversation with someone on Instagram, and this was just asking me for bike sizing advice. And I said, listen, I tend not to do that. Do you want to work with me on purchasing a bike? I'll need a lot more information before I make a recommendation and all that. And then he said something like, well, I'm just asking you for the size of the frame I should buy. It's not like I'm asking you, like, handlebars or what saddle height I should ride or stuff. And I'm like, okay, he just doesn't get it, because I'm giving him recommendation on what is potentially, if not definitely, the most expensive purchase and the one thing you can't fix on a new bike purchase. Once the bike size is wrong, there's nothing else you could do to make it right. You can always change a handlebar, you could always raise or lower your saddle, you could always change your crank arms. Those things don't cost much in comparison to the frame. So he just didn't get it, that I wasn't, he was like, well, I'm just asking you what size bike I should buy. I'm not asking you about any of the other details. I'm like, anyway, there you go. Another example of a day in a life type of thing. But I wish to hear your comments, your questions, your concerns. Drop them down below. Let's see if we can get a discussion going, and let's see if we can get another video to piggyback off of this. And thank you, Russ, for putting up that content. I watch you as much as possible, and you have a great channel and great followers as well. So anyway, that's all for today. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you up the road.